and all those who are studying Sparta and the Peloponnese. We thank CSPS for strengthening the global Sparta and Peloponnese academic community, forming invaluable opportunities for early career researchers and for leading the study of Sparta, Laconia, and the Peloponnese over the last 20 years. Yet the birth of AGIDO could not have happened without those who have continued to support and, to borrow this term from Professor Kavanagh's presentation a few weeks ago, turbocharged all that was founded 20 years ago. In particular, I would like to thank Dr. Chrysanthi Galoo, the lead mentor of the AGIDO webinar series, whose enthusiasm, knowledge, and immense support has forged the name and dream that is AGIDO. We thank you. It is also a great privilege to announce that Professor Ellen Millender of Reed College, the world-leading expert on the study of Spartan women, is the senior mentor for the AGIDO series. Above all else, we are honoured for your expertise, encouragement, and guidance. We thank you. Gratitude must also be given to Yorgos Spiropoulos of the Hellenic Ministry of Culture and member of the CSPS Managing Committee at the University of Nottingham, who has also greatly honoured the AGIDO Committee by accepting the role of mentor. We thank you, Dr. Spiropoulos, for your expertise, guidance, and for having strengthened this initiative by driving the establishment of the extraordinary AGIDO Research Assistant Committee. Profound thanks go to the co-founders of the CSPS professors, Kavanagh and Wilkinson, for leading the way and for offering the best role models any early career researchers would have wished for. It would also be a mistake to omit the hard work, passion, and aid that has arisen from those who are the AGIDO research assistants, and more recently, and rightly, termed the AGIDO Dream Team. Thea Wolf, Catherine Viola, and Malvina Alexopoulos are those I am joined by, and I do believe that, without their excellence, AGIDO would not be striving onwards so fiercely. To all the names under the CSPS and to those who have carried the AGIDO webinar series thus far, I thank you. Whether this be a blessed dream or a reality that is far too good to be true, I promise that we, the AGIDO Committee, will do justice to the incredible history of Spartan and Peloponnesian women, from prehistory to the Roman period. It is through this intergenerational webinar series that their lives, roles, and voices may be heard, and the astounding volume of research on these women given a global recognition that is very much deserved. From today and onwards, AGIDO's brightness shall shine on. It is with great pleasure that I would now like to invite Professor Ellen Millender to deliver her talk. World-leading Spartan historian Professor Ellen Millender is the Omar and Althea Hoskins Professor of Greek, Latin, and Ancient Mediterranean Studies and Humanities at Reed College. She has published extensively on many aspects of Spartan society, including kingship, leadership, literacy, military organisation, and of course, women. Today, she will talk to us about the disordered Spartan female, wealth, neglect, and the dangers of Sparta's private world. Professor Millender, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So first of all, I very much want to thank Chrysanthi Galoo and Abigail Costello and the other members of Abby, what you just called the AGIDO Dream Team, for inviting me to give this lecture, which is a tremendous honor and pleasure. So when I was asked to give a lecture on Spartan women to inaugurate the new Center for Spartan and Peloponnesian Studies webinar series, AGIDO, I was immediately excited to do so, but I have to admit that about 10 minutes later, a bit of panic set in. What more could I say about Spartan women? Fortunately for everyone here today, the last 30 years has witnessed a great amount of groundbreaking scholarship on the part of historians, archaeologists, and philologists that has more than addressed the gap in our understanding of Spartan women. Research has illuminated their position in Sparta's complex social system and economy, education and literacy, involvement in Spartan religious practices and the rituals that initiated them into marriage and motherhood, inheritance and possession of wealth, sexual and marital practices, role in enculturating their menfolk, and finally, power as wives, mothers, princesses, and queens. Scholars have also closely considered the reasons why Spartan females figured so prominently and over such a long period in many of our ancient sources, on ancient Lacedaemon. And for those of you, again, who may not be so familiar with this material, I will be using Lacedaemon and Sparta interchangeably. Well, I'm here today. Why? Because there is much more work to be done on ancient Sparta in general and on this polis women in particular. Today, I'd like to inaugurate this webinar series by considering a thread that runs through the ancient sources that are key to our understanding of ancient Lacedaemon, namely, their treatment of women as a particularly persistent and pernicious source of disorder that threatened the health and stability of the Spartan politeia. Our sources, of course, attribute the Lacedaemonians' decline to a number of factors, including their many missteps as hegemonic leaders after their defeat of Athens in 404 BCE, their oliganthropia, that's a lovely Greek word meaning their chronic decline in manpower, and their corruption and hunger for power as recorded in the works of authors such as the 4th century writers Xenophon and Isocrates. Their contemporary Plato explicitly describes the Spartan system as defective because of its primary orientation toward warfare. His student Aristotle goes much further in his vehement criticism of Sparta, whether he's discussing the city-state's political structures, inheritance practices, or focus on conquest and domination. Aristotle, however, becomes most heated in his critique of the Spartans' arrangements regarding their women, including the practice of giving large dowries, which, according to him, put 2/5 of all land in the hands of women and created the demographic crisis that led to Sparta's defeat at Leuctra in 371 BCE. Today, however, I am more interested in another defect that Aristotle detected in the Spartan politeia, and this is PowerPoint, the next PowerPoint, Chrysanthi. And I'm going to quote him here in full. Again, the license in regard to women is harmful with a view both to the intention of the Constitution and the happiness of the city. For just as man and woman are a part of the household, it is clear that the city should be considered as about equally divided into a multitude of men and a multitude of women. So in constitutions in which the condition of women is poorly handled, half of the city must be regarded as unregulated by law. And this is what actually happened there, meaning at Sparta. For the lawgiver wished the whole city to be hardy, and this is manifestly the case in terms of the men, but he has been utterly careless in the case of the women, for they live in luxury and without any restraint in any form of licentiousness. I'm going to stop there. Soon thereafter, this is the next PowerPoint, Aristotle adds that, quote, when Lycurgus, as tradition has it, tried to bring the women under his laws, they resisted and he gave up the attempt. And he then claims that the poor handling of women harmed the Spartan politeia and promoted the love of money. As I've argued in a recent study of Spartan women's reputed luxury for Aristotle and Plato in his laws, the problem with the arrangements regarding Lacedaemonian females was essentially a failure in both legislation and education. Thanks to the state's failure to regulate the female and hence private sphere, Spartan women, according to these authors, enjoyed a latitude in their households that, together with their wealth, gave them power both over their respective households and the polis as a whole. Today, I would like to revisit some of the texts that I've studied over the years to consider the extent to which this construction of the disordered Spartan woman runs through other sources, and if and how it changed over time. Through my necessarily brief and preliminary exploration, I hope to show that this representation, which enjoyed longevity in the ancient world, can reveal a great deal about how the Spartans themselves, and not just their enemies, thought about the place of women in their society. Now, given my time constraints today, I've decided to focus on only two texts, beginning with Herodotus's histories, composed mostly during the third quarter of the 5th century BCE. And you should know you're going to be getting a whole bunch of long, complicated names, and there will be an exam for all of you. Chrysanthi didn't say this, but at the end of my talk. Just joking. Herodotus, one of our richest sources on ancient Lacedaemon, offers a number of important depictions of Spartan women, especially those belonging to the two royal dynasties. The chance to dive back into his histories has turned out to be such a gift because it allowed me to revisit and deepen my thinking on his treatment of Sparta in general. I still believe today that the Spartans' Athenian enemies, and especially their democratic practice and ideology, strongly influenced Herodotus's overall treatment of Sparta in his account of the Persian Wars. At the same time, I hope to show today that a number of Herodotus's Lacedaemonian logoi, meaning his stories, simultaneously reflect the Spartans' own anxieties about their women's capacity for disorder and disruption. We should, in other words, not be surprised to see both Spartan sources and Athenian influence at play in accounts of Spartan women that have become part of the Spartan mirage, i.e., the nexus of positive and negative ideas and images about the Spartans that has its roots in the ancient world, but is continuing to evolve as we speak. Since much scholarly ink has been spilt on the history's treatment of the Spartan princess and queen Gorgo, I would like to focus today on a few Spartan females in the histories who have received far less attention. The first is Argeia, the wife of Aristodemus, whom we're told died early and left her to raise by herself their twins, who became the founders of the two royal houses of Sparta, the Agiids and the Eurypontids. And this is in Book 6, Section 52. Herodotus tells us that when the Spartans wanted to know which of the twins was older in order to make him king, Argeia feigned ignorance because she wanted to ensure that both would become kings. What is noteworthy about the story is not just Argeia's intelligence, but also her interest in putting her personal familial needs before that of the Lacedaemonians who, according to Herodotus, simply sought to adhere to customary practice. Perhaps most troubling in the PowerPoint that you're looking at is that despite her wish to see her sons enjoy equal power as kings, Argeia clearly demonstrates her preference for Eurysthenes over his brother Procles, and thereby initiates an inherently unstable double kingship, otherwise known as a diarchy, that is founded on inequality and strife, beginning with Argeia's two feuding sons. This account of Argeia's disruption to Spartan stability takes on far more significance when we consider its placement within Herodotus's unusually detailed account of the bitter political conflict in the early 5th century BCE between the two co-kings, the Agiid Cleomenes I and the Eurypontid Demaratus. Perhaps not coincidentally, we find other Spartan females at the center of both inter- and intra-dynastic conflicts within this large narrative of these diarchs destabilizing strife. As I argued years ago, the folkloric tone of these accounts of Spartan women helped to associate the Spartan royal houses with the courts of tyrants and barbarian monarchs, and distance the Lacedaemonians from their fellow Greeks, especially their Athenian enemies. There is, however, so much more to say about these women, beginning with the two unnamed wives of the Agiid king Anaxandridas II, who reigned around circa 550 to 520 BCE. Okay, now this is all according to Herodotus. He tells that although his first wife, his sister's daughter, is unable to provide him with children, the Agiid king still clings to her, despite the advice that he receives from the Spartan ephors and the Gerontes, the elders, to divorce her and thus please the Spartans. That's the next PowerPoint. So we're in Book 9, sections 39 to 40. While Herodotus does not give an explanation for this king's disobedience beyond remarking that he was devoted to his niece, it is more than likely that it was her wealth and the need to keep it within the family that explains this close kin marriage. In response to the nebulous threat that the Spartans will find a less pleasant way to deal with his recalcitrance, Anaxandridas takes as his second wife the daughter of a certain Prenetidas, son of Demarmenus, and it's a name I want you to remember. And this is an act that Herodotus describes as oudamos Spartiatica, meaning in no way Spartan. Wife number 2 quickly produces a successor to the Agiid throne, the future Cleomenes I. Herodotus then tells us that the first wife, who had previously been barren, somehow conceived. Immediately noteworthy is the tone of his account, which focuses on the aberrant nature of the second marriage, emphasizes the speed of the one conception, and questions the legitimacy of the other as some kind of piece of luck. Even more striking is Herodotus' description of the strife that broke out after Anaxandridas' first wife surprisingly conceived. And we find her kin seated around her rival as the rival was giving birth. This episode, as Stephen Hodkinson has argued, illustrates how passionately elite families in Sparta sought and then guarded such alliances with the royal houses. The second wife's kin, as we see here, and we're going to see a little bit later, were indeed ambitious in their desire to arrange distinguished marriages for their womenfolk. So ambitious that in this account, they appear to have precipitated a struggle over the succession to the AGIDO throne. Both wives, granted, appear to be passive participants in this struggle, one of several in the histories in which Herodotus depicts the hereditary principle of succession as inherently unstable. Herodotus, nevertheless, emphasizes the women's inherent ability to destabilize the system through their reproductive power, which his language, as we have seen, treats as capricious and disruptive. The wives are either barren or suspiciously quick to conceive. The fruits of the reproductive power, not surprisingly, turn out to be equally destabilizing in the form of two more royal Spartans who continue the tradition of feuding begun by Argaea. The aforementioned Cleomenes I, who is ostensibly insane from birth, possibly because he came from an aberrant marriage, and his half-brother Doriaeus, whom we're told in his uncontrollable anger at not being king, later embarks on several ill-omened and disastrous expeditions, the final one leading to his death and the destruction of his army in Sicily. And this is all in the middle of book 5. Equally disruptive are the Spartan females who figure more directly in Herodotus' account of the conflict between the Agiad Cleomenes I and his Eurypontid co-king Demaratus. It is actually, when you go back and read it, surprising how central women are to Herodotus' discussion of Cleomenes' eventually successful attempt to depose Demaratus, his rival. Here, we meet Demaratus' father, Ariston, another king, who ruled, we should say, circa 550 to 515, another king who failed to produce an heir despite having been married twice, but who succeeded with wife number 3. Herodotus then tells us that this new unnamed wife, who had apparently been ugly despite the fact that her family was wealthy, I find that an interesting connection, later became by far the most beautiful woman in Sparta and married Ariston's close friend, the obviously elite Aegetus. According to Herodotus, Ariston, chafed by his errors for this woman, cheated his friend out of his wife by means of a deceitful trick and then married her. This is, I think, we're on 663 Chrysanthe. Okay, yeah. So in addition to inspiring her new husband's unhealthy passion and lack of control, as well as yet another rivalry between royal and elite Spartiates, meaning between her husband and his friend, this new queen follows in the footsteps of Anaxandridas' wives in her suspiciously quick production of a son Demaratus, thereby jeopardizing the stability of the Eurypontid succession. One should note the inauspicious nature of Demaratus' birth. Instead of being, as his name would indicate, the answer to the people's prayer, Demaratus is the product of deceit and a lust that leads to a hasty marriage. More importantly, if we believe Herodotus at 664, it was this elite Spartan woman's beauty and possible adultery with Ariston that was ultimately responsible for her son's deposition, rather than any of the policy issues and rivalries that we see at play in the histories. Soon thereafter, Herodotus introduces yet another Spartan woman as he recounts Cleomenes' political alliance with Leotychidas. I told you there were going to be a lot of long names here. This Leotychidas, a member of a collateral branch of the Eurypontid dynasty, and they became allies in order to neutralize Demaratus. Now, this Leotychidas eventually replaced Demaratus on the Eurypontid throne and ruled as Leotychidas II from circa 491 to circa 469 BCE. Okay, we're going to focus on the women and not these men. Now, according to Herodotus, Leotychidas willingly agreed to support Cleomenes' plans to oust Demaratus because of their rivalry over another elite Spartan female, Pericles, the daughter of Chilon, son of Demarmenus. And yes, this the same Demarmenus you heard about a few minutes earlier in my talk, whose socially ambitious kin, the ones members sitting around the pregnant woman, engaged in a heated struggle over the Agiad succession. It would appear that this elite family was now seeking to ally itself with the Euryponta royal house. Although Leotychidas was betrothed to Pericles, Herodotus suggests that Demaratus deprived him of this marriage by swooping in and seizing this prized female before Leotychidas had consummated his marriage. That's at 665. Here we thus have a second example of wife stealing, but Demaratus acquires his wife through force, while Ariston gained his third wife through deceit. Demaratus clearly found Pericles to be an especially attractive match, which should not surprise us, given her prominent family's apparent connection to the famous Emperor Chilon. Whatever the case might be about his motives, Herodotus' stark account of this king's marriage by capture at the very least suggests his lack of self-control and flouting of customary practice. More importantly, Herodotus suggests that Pericles' loss made Leotychidas so hostile to Demaratus that he was willing to perjure himself, swearing on oath that Demaratus was not Ariston's son, and then dragging the ephors, as important Spartan officials, into court to support his claim. While Pericles is a passive participant in these events, Herodotus clearly places her at the center of the aberrant behavior and political chaos that not only envelops Sparta, but even reaches Delphi. There, according to Herodotus, Cleomenes suborned the Pythia to declare Demaratus illegitimate. Yet another very serious aberration, given the Spartans' reputed piety and close relationship with Delphi. As Herodotus readers know, the Cleomenes logos, this whole story about this king and his rivalries that began with the rivalry between Anaxandridas' wives, ends poorly for everyone concerned, starting with the deposed Demaratus, who suffers humiliation at the hands of his successor and takes himself off to Persia. His successor Leotychidas comes to a sticky end as punishment for his treatment of Demaratus when he's banished after being found guilty on a charge of bribery. Cleomenes' end is particularly awful, if we believe Herodotus, as he ostensibly slices himself to death while in prison as a result of several factors, including his ostensibly inherited madness and his corruption of the priestess at Delphi. What is so interesting, however, is the fact that Herodotus, as he nears the conclusion of his account of Demaratus' fall, circles back once more to Demaratus' unnamed mother at section 668 to 9. And this is going to be the next PowerPoint on 668. He tells us that before leaving Sparta, the deposed diarch sends for his mother and begs her by the gods to tell the truth about his paternity. And I love this quote, so I'm going to quote it in full. For Leotychidas said during our disputes that you were pregnant by your former husband when you came to Ariston, while others, telling an even more foolish story, say that you approached one of his servants, the ass-keeper, and that I am his son. I then beseech you, Chrysanthi, there's feedback. Okay. If you have done anything of what they say, you are not alone. Many women have done such things. How dare he say something like that? Anyway, end quote. Here we see the disruptive capacity of Spartan females on full display in two ways. We have a Spartan woman who is not passive, but rather, like many presumably Spartan women, apparently has control over her reproductive choices. We are also witnesses to the destructive potential of such power in the form of 1, rumors imputing a queen's sexual fidelity, 2, the undermining of the key principle of succession, and 3, and the worst, the production of a king possibly descended from a keeper of asses. While the importune mother vigorously defends her reputation and castigates Demaratus' enemies, her defense, and this is our next slide, is not entirely convincing and even throws further doubt on her sexual continence by what can only sound like special pleading. Here, she begins by claiming that the hero Astrabacus appearing in the likeness of her husband Ariston, lay with her and conceived Demaratus, a story that her husband, I think we can appreciate, finds unconvincing, but which she swears is the truth. Even though she claims that Ariston came to believe her, she admits, like Herodotus earlier in his narrative, that Ariston later disavowed his paternity. The mother then attributes Ariston's denial of his son to his ignorance of what we might call women's matters, and the very real possibility of a woman giving birth at 7 months. Even though Demaratus appears convinced, Herodotus's readers surely leave this exchange with more questions than answers. The only one who knows the truth about her possible sexual partners and thus has ultimate control over the question of succession is the Spartan mother, who is, in the histories, at the nexus of the political turmoil roiling Sparta on the eve of the Persian Wars. So thus far in Herodotus, we see Spartan women as disrupting the political order in Sparta and hence endangering the very fabric of the Spartans' politeia in key ways. They either produce too many children, as in the case of Argeia, or produce children with warring speed, as in the case of Ariston's and Anaxandridas' wives, or they have difficulty producing heirs at all, as in the case of the initially barren first wife of Anaxandridas. These females also provoke unhealthy and destructive passions, whether manifested as desire or rage, that lead to transgressions of customary behavior and community norms. While Ariston's third wife is ostensibly responsible for her husband's excessive ardor and deception of his best friend, Anaxandridas' second wife literally constitutes in herself as a second wife a violation of Spartan nomos, and Pericles, as we have seen, likewise induces Demaratus to violate her betrothal to his kinsman. All of the Spartan females, moreover, foment and end up enmeshed in violent rivalries both within and between the two hereditary royal houses. Rivalries that, as we have seen, have ramifications for Sparta both internally and externally. While some, like Pericles and Anaxandridas' wives, appear to be passive participants in the turmoil that surrounds and emanates from them, Argeia and Demaratus' wealthy and beautiful mother emerge from the histories as more active agents of disorder. Their power, moreover, not only resides in their marital and reproductive capacities, but also in their wealth and elite status, aspects of the characterization that Herodotus makes clear. Herodotus, however, features even more obviously destabilizing Spartan females in his account of the Minyae, the ostensible descendants of the crew of the Argo and some Lemnian women. This is in Book 4. These men, we're told, eventually made their way to Lacedaemon, where we are told, among other things, they married Lacedaemonian women. After they were later imprisoned, and this is our next PowerPoint, Herodotus tells us that their Spartan wives saved their lives. Now, one might be tempted to dismiss this account as just another strange anecdote in the histories, but there are details here that are absolutely worth a revisit. Consider Herodotus' description of these women as elite citizens who, we should say, not only wear the trousers, got to be British here today, so to speak, in the scene, but prove to be dangerous to the polis in their greater loyalty to their foreign husbands than to their fellow Lacedaemonians. Through their persuasive speech and treachery, these women support men who purportedly aimed at the Spartan kingship, committed acts of impiety, and later encamped like a hostile force on the Taygetus range. While Herodotus does not tell us what happened to this hostile force, it is noteworthy that he follows this story with an account of a certain Theras, the uncle of and regent of those twins we met earlier, Eurysthenes and Procles, the twin founders of the two royal dynasties. We learn that Theras, after his nephews attained their majority and became kings, could not endure to be a subject since he had had a taste of supreme power and left Lacedaemon. This anecdote cannot help but recall Herodotus' aforementioned account of the angry Aegean prince Doriaeus, and the pairing of these stories cannot be coincidental. While one can never pinpoint the source for such Spartan logoi in the histories, here we again appear to have one of many glimmers of internal strife around the kingship, but if you'll notice, at the center of many of these glimmers, we have a Spartan woman. What makes this piece of evidence especially tantalizing is its focus on elite women who are not immediately connected to either royal house. But these women parallel the other elite Spartan women that we have considered in their primary loyalty to their families, their socio-political ambitions, and their capacity to threaten the interest and very order of the larger community. The Spartan wives of the Minyae, who symbolize the disorder that they threaten in their donning of men's clothes, go much further than the other women in their willingness to support sedition and even a possible invasion. Whatever the historical circumstances that underlay this myth, it again signals the Spartans' sources' concerns about the dangers that women could pose to the politeia. Okay, I'm on to our next, and this hopefully will be a brief discussion of our next source, and this is Euripides, Andromache, composed circa 425, and here we're going to be looking at his characterization of the Spartan princess Hermione. Now, looking at Euripides' Hermione, again, after many years and with, I hope, slightly fresh eyes, I have to say I was struck by the fact that she is truly disorder personified, and that there are several aspects of her characterization that link her closely with the disordered Spartan females featured in Herodotus' histories. Like the histories Spartan women, Hermione wreaks havoc because of her reproductive issues, and this is my next slide, PowerPoint 10, Chrysanthi. Again, she, as I said a second ago, she proves unable to produce an heir for her husband Neoptolemus, who is the son of Achilles. We hear about her barrenness at the beginning of the tragedy from Andromache, the former wife of the Trojan hero Hector, who is now Neoptolemus' slave and the unwilling mother of his child. Although Andromache does not want to share this unhappy marital couch, Hermione insists on seeing her Trojan slave as a rival and is bent on killing her. Euripides emphasizes the rivalry at several points in this tragedy, and I need the next slide, please. For example, when the chorus, in the guise of a Phaeacian woman, sympathizes with Andromache's endless troubles, which pit the wretched woman against Hermione in hateful strife over a double marriage bed and the husband, the son of Achilles, that they hold in common. Later in the play, Hermione directly accuses Andromache of wanting to drive her from her loyal marriage and of rendering her womb destroyed. At the end of her tirade, Hermione herself talks about the problems that arise when one man has two women in his bed, lines 177-80, and this is a sentiment that both she and other characters continue to echo in the tragedy. What is immediately obvious here is the parallel between these two wives, if you could call Andromache a wife. So I mean Andromache and Hermione here, and the history's two wives of Anaxandridas, who were likewise embroiled in a competition over a marriage bed and succession. Hermione, granted, is here the second wife, but barren and far more active in the promotion of the struggle than her Herodotean counterpart. Nevertheless, the echoes are striking, especially when we consider the almost ridiculous reaction to this rivalry on the part of Hermione's family, i.e. her father, Menelaus, again, another famous Trojan War figure. This time around, however, we do not have family members and officials sitting around the bed of an expectant mother, but we have a father whose behavior is transgressive in many respects. Not only does he interfere in his son-in-law's household and kingdom, but he also tricks the suppliant Andromache into leaving the sacred precinct where she has taken refuge by threatening to kill her son. Andromache mocks Menelaus, and she rightly questions his overreaction to his daughter's domestic problems for creating, quote, great evils for small reasons. She also notes, ironically, that strife involving another woman, and you know who we mean here, his infamous wife Helen, led to Menelaus' earlier poor decision to destroy Troy. In an attempt to defend his actions, and I need the next PowerPoint slide, Menelaus only furthers Andromache's contention that he puts his family's needs before all else. So when you look at this passage, anyone familiar with later 4th century Athenian ideas about Lacedaemonian property arrangements can immediately see that Euripides is emphasizing Menelaus' Spartan identity. While that is probably not surprising, this portrait of Spartan communality clashes with this Lacedaemonian leader's prioritization of his private realm, okay, his household over the public sphere. In line with his focus on his family is Menelaus's odd appointment of himself as his daughter's ally, as if their domestic troubles are akin to broader political and military threats. The ultimate result of Menelaus's seemingly un-Spartan priorities is his decision to put his family's needs above the good of both his own realm and that of his son-in-law Neoptolemus, going to the point not only of manhandling Andromache, but even deciding to slaughter both Andromache and Neoptolemus' only child. And here I need the next PowerPoint slide. It is in this final transgression that we most clearly see the problematic conflation of the public political realm and the private familial realm, and the prioritization of the latter over the former. Here, Menelaus oddly claims that both his vote, again, striking word, and that of his daughter will send the Trojan slave and her son to their deaths in order to protect his house. Even though Neoptolemus' old grandfather Peleus ultimately scares off that blowhard and coward and bully Menelaus, Hermione still manages to wreak havoc. After being abandoned by her father, Hermione follows in the footsteps of her mother Helen by fleeing her own household with another man, in this case, her equally dysfunctional cousin Orestes. As they discuss their flight, Orestes reveals his plan to murder Hermione's husband. He claims that Menelaus had originally given Hermione to him as wife, but then later offered her to Neoptolemus. Okay, we need the next slide, please. These are lines 999 to 1001. Although Orestes later begged Neoptolemus to divorce Hermione so that he could marry her himself, the Theban king refused, creating a long-held grudge, which Orestes expresses as follows: "And I, the matricide, if the oaths of my allies throughout the Pythian land hold good, will teach him not to marry someone who was mine." What should strike everybody here is the parallel between Orestes' feud with Neoptolemus over Hermione and the feud between the Eurypontes Leotychidas and Demaratus over the desirable Pericles. You have to wonder if Euripides here is demonstrating his awareness of the tales of Spartan female disorder that run through Herodotus' histories. Euripides' Hermione, of course, goes well beyond Pericles in terms of being active and in terms of the trail of destruction, both private and public, that she leaves in her wake through her own disorder as a barren woman and the destructive passion that she inspires in Orestes. As the aged Peleus later learns, Orestes not only planned Neoptolemus' death, but actually participated in the impious and brutal murder of his grandson within the sacred precinct of Apollo. And again, we see an incredibly aberrant act at Delphi, a very central religious site to which the Spartans reputedly had very close ties. And here I'm getting to my conclusion. In addition to her own capacity for disorder and her father's equally excessive concern, Euripides also goes far beyond the Spartan women in Herodotus' work in terms of her wealth. And Euripides, in fact, makes her affluence a key aspect of her characterization through the play. And this is our next slide, which I will not quote. And this is when she is introduced into the play. There's so many interesting issues in this speech, but I can only raise a few because I'm near the end of my talk. First, what I think is striking is that although the audience knows that she's a Spartan princess, Hermione introduces herself in terms that parallel her to the elite women that we meet in Herodotus' account. Here she is, yet another daughter of a wealthy and prominent Spartan father, granted a pretty important family who's better than that of her husband. Far more important, though, is her claim that her inherited wealth has given her power within her home. And I'd like to get to the next slide, please. This is a claim that she makes even more explicitly near the end of the tragedy in line 940, when she laments her destruction of her marriage. Quote, "I was very wealthy and I ruled the house." Here, as I've argued elsewhere, we can see evidence of the same belief that Plato and Aristotle shared later, namely that elite Spartan women's wealth translated into power within their households. Euripides' characterization of Hermione as a woman entirely out of control likewise accords with Aristotle's later complaints about the Spartans' failure to regulate their women. Now, as I conclude, I know that some people here today might wonder if these treatments of Spartan women reflect anything more than the long-held fears of female reproduction and lack of control that we find throughout Greek literature, as well as the linkages between females and wealth that we see very early, as in the case of the mare, like the horsewoman, in Simonides' famous 7th century poem. To my imagined interlocutors, I would respond that we see something more particular in the representations of Spartan women that I've discussed today, and others that I would have loved to have shared with you had time allowed. Despite the variations in the representations of Lacedaemonians that I've discussed, we can see, I would argue, glimmers of the Spartans' anxieties about a nexus of issues around the female: reproduction, family, wealth, and the private household that is neglected. That makes sense when we consider the Spartan system as described by Xenophon in his 4th century exploration of the Spartan politeia. According to Xenophon, Sparta was a society arranged around the production and education of a body of male citizen soldiers idealized as homoioi, i.e. the same ones. Although, as we've seen in Herodotus and you can see in other sources, the Spartans were in no way uniform in terms of wealth status and influence. For a society focused on the promotion of an ordered male public realm, the female posed obvious dangers despite the necessity of her reproduction. The female, along with the male-centered community, the female, along with the private realm of the household, its fortunes and its needs, structurally stood in opposition to the male-centered community and thus threatened the stability of the entire system. And not only the 2 royal dynasties that also, I've argued elsewhere, occupied an odd position vis-a-vis the Spartan politeia as a whole. As the Spartan system experienced profound structural changes in the 5th and 4th centuries, we see in our sources like Herodotus and Euripides glimmers of anxiety about the feminine and private realm of the household. These glimmers obviously gained in intensity and frequency in the 4th century as elite Spartans, if we believe Xenophon, increasingly put their own and their families' interest above the overall health and stability of the community of homoioi, and as Athenians like Aristotle attempted to make sense of Sparta's decline into a second-rate power. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Professor. That was a wonderful presentation. Now we invite Dr. Post to say a few words too.
Abi?
Abi, your microphone
Yeah.
or your Wi-Fi is not good.
Abi, did I hear my name?
Oh, which I
yes,
was I would like to invite you to say a few words.
Yes, thank you so much, Abi. So, first of all, I wish to congratulate Professor Ella Millender on this wonderful presentation. Very thought-provoking and perceptive lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For doing this. And no amount of thanks will be enough for Abi, Malvina, Thea, and Fiola for this wonderful initiative, and whose belief in and enthusiasm for this lecture provide the impetus that launched it on its path to realization. Briefly, I mentioned that as part of this webinar series, I also plan to give a lecture on 6 young women that were celebrated for their beauty and served as priestesses in a temple dedicated to Artemis Cariatis in Carias, a town near Sparta in the Peloponnese. According to the ancient sources, such as those by Pausanias, the maidens of Caria performed a unique ecstatic ritual dance every year in honor of Artemis, while the statues of them, the 6 statues of them, made by Kallimachos, and are in the last decade of the 6th century BC, and originally are standing opposite the core of the Erection, were integrated and found in the villa of Zacchaeus that was excavated under my supervision. Sources describe Kallimachos, briefly mentioned, as an artist whose principal gifts were elegance, subtlety, and excessive exaggerated diligence. And these qualities emerge more strikingly in Kallimachos in his dancing caryatids, as you can see here, this one here, but also in the medals made by the same artist. So this could be my lecture for this in the context of this wonderful seminar. Thank you so much for your attention. And once again, congratulations on this wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was brilliant.
Okay, I can say that we have a raising hand from Paula. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi, Ellen.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew I was going to get a question from you.
Of course. Well, I'm quite interested in this illusion between the royalty and you sort of dropped it at the end, you know, and by the way, this also is relevant, you know, to other Spartan women, because if the Spartans themselves are exceptional, I mean, the royal houses are even more exceptional, and they are not homoioi. I mean, not until you get to Agesilaus do you get someone who's gone through their paideia. So I'm just wondering, you know, how much these royal quarrels, especially because of the inherent problems in having a diarchy, how much you think they tell you about sort of Spartan society in general?
Well, that is a great question, and I can answer it. No, because I've actually written, I have a piece coming out on Spartan kings, where I'm arguing that the kingship, by its very exceptionality, stands in almost like a structural opposition to the homoioi, right? So yes, I mean, one could argue that you clearly have issues there. I mean, and again, it's women through their capacity. They're the ones who give birth. They're the ones who ensure succession. But it's also about money, and we know about all these close kin relationships where the kings, they're not just seeking women within their own families, though. This is what makes Herodotus so interesting, right? They're also these marital alliances with wealthy women from the elites. So it's not just that that it's succession that creates a problem. It's generally, I would argue, it's families that create a problem. If that makes some sense. The royal families take that to the next degree. But you know, Xenophon doesn't really talk a lot about women in his he doesn't really in the Lackfall. He talks about wife sharing, and he also talks about female exercise. But when he gets to the end and he talks about Spartan elites who are much more interested in wealth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I mean, he really is talking about what you could argue a lot of what's going on sort of in the private realm. I mean, and I would argue he makes that clear, for example, when he talks about like the finding of wealth, like if wealth should appear, that is a problem. That wealth is something that, so the private realm is the area of the family, it's of money, right? It's of all the sort of concerns that household do well. And the woman, and that is the woman's space. So I completely agree with you. This just gets multiplied when we're talking about the two royal families. But I would argue it's going on in the elites, obviously, and we certainly see that in both Herodotus, and we see it in Xenophon, and if I had time to talk to you, we see it in Plutarch all over the place as well. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
No, you did. Thank you. That I just wanted to sort of tease that out since you dropped it in at the very end. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. I can see another raising hand from Petros. Please go ahead. Your microphone. Your microphone, Petros.
Okay, with
Okay.
So,
can
perfect. Hello, Dr. Melender. It was a really nice talk, and thank you very much for this. I'm glad to meet you as well.
Nice to meet you too.
I would like to say two things. One, note that, in fact, from us that we are Laconians here, we know that the same thing that the second wife, like the second woman, to take an inside the house, in the man's house, was continued in Laconia until the early 20th century. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was called Sigria.
If you could send me, that would be such a wonderful thing to add to this, please. That'd be
Yes, of course.
any information you have, that'd be great.
Yeah, it was called Sigria, which means co-mistress, and it was in the cases when the first wife couldn't produce heirs. So my second, it's a question, in fact. It is about, like, based on the fact that both Herodotus and Euripides wrote mainly during the Peloponnesian War, and also about two periods that Athens and Sparta were struggling between each other about the supremacy, because both in the Persian Wars, basically, the whole thing was who will come out as a leader of the Greeks after this struggle with the Persians. How far can we trust Herodotus' account about the situation in Sparta and the causes of these rivalries between the two royal families? That's it, in fact, because it could be mostly often, I think, of an Athenian point of view, as he lived.
And Petros, I would say I very much have agreed with you. That's what I've written about in previous publications. Very much that I've argued that Herodotus' overall treatment of Sparta, and especially the diarchy, and is very heavily influenced by Athenian ideology. Yes, absolutely, Athenian democratic ideology and practice. What I've come to see, though, and I always hope that as we get older, that our views become more complex. One always hopes. Very much, I would argue, and Euripides is extremely influenced by Athens as well, especially when we think about the democratic form of tragedy in which he's doing his writing. What I'm arguing, though, and here I've come over the years closer to my dear friend and colleague whom I miss desperately, Anton Powell, who Anton Powell long argued that, we should make sure that we also see Spartan, like, where do we see Spartan sources? So what I'm arguing is that these two are not mutually exclusive, right? That you can see glimmers of anxiety on the part of Spartans. At the same time, you can see an overlay of Athenian ideology, if that makes some sense. Those two are not mutually exclusive. I think, in fact, that's what makes these presentations of Spartan women so interesting, because they're so multi-layered, or over-determined, you might argue. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Oh, no, thank you, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much, Petro. Let us move on to the next question from Selene, please.
Hi, Ellen. This is Selene Psoma.
Hi,
I'm so
nice
glad to see you again. So thank you very much for this great talk. I couldn't agree more. Andromache is full of, let's say, Athenian ideas about Sparta. There's this very characteristic line where it says, Sparta is full of murderers. And it's exactly the spirit of the war or whatever. So we learned really a lot, and I liked very much your approach. 2 or 3 small things. First, as far as the Agogé is concerned, there is a very recent publication of Luke Matson showing that we have, in fact, not only Agesilaus, but other people, but other, people that finally, because of the system of succession and problems
Yes.
within the royal house, became kings and received the pedia. Probably Agesilaus was the more fatal one. And there is these things with powerful women, and then we know that the sources might reproduce probably the truth for the late 3rd century and the two great kings Agis and Cleomenes.
Yes.
But these are positive because these are the women that want Sparta to change, to do this and do that, and they help a lot the kings. And another thing, another disaster, probably a more spectacular one, came from a woman who was not wealthy. The wife of Agis, the one who had the baby with Alcibiades. We are told, at least by Xenophon, that this woman was poor, and that's why Agesilaus was so good that he gave her back. I don't know if we have to believe Xenophon. It's another problematic thing, and a sort of tragic thing also, that in fact Athens had all these ideas about Sparta in her head during the war, but in fact the person who gave the lethal injection to the 30 and to oligarchy was a Spartan king, Pausanias. So which shows that, as you exactly said, we must be very careful with the sources and what we read and where we read it. But thank you again very much.
So can I? Oh, thank you so much. So one response I will make. Yes, Luke Madsen's work I know, and he does show, and it was very useful for me because we think of that the idea that these kings do not go through the upbringing. But I think as we see, lots of kings eventually end up there, right? Who were not ever intended. Agesilaus is the one we know the best about from Plutarch's life. But as for the women in the biographies of Agis and Cleomenes, what's so interesting there, so I'm going to slightly disagree with you respectfully. First of all, you have the wealthy women. That's what I love. You have the wealthy women who fight, right? Who fight against the reforms and are literally the drivers of what's going to be the death, the death of Agis, right?
Yes.
But also it's so interesting, the scene where we hear about him with his mother and his grandmother, when he appeals to them, and I may be wrong here, but I want to go back and read. When he appeals to them, he doesn't really appeal on the ground of making Sparta stronger. He appeals to them on the grounds of making their house stronger.
Stronger, yes.
So even then, it's much more about the good of their dynasty than of the good of the community as a whole, as he's trying to restore what you might call the age of the homoioi. So even they who are, you could argue, and they do support him, but their rationale for supporting him, I would argue, is not what I would call community-based, if that makes some sense.
Yeah, I see the point. Yes, thank you.
But thank you so much for your questions. I really thank you for coming today. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hope to see you soon.
I'll be there for a month in May.
Oh, great! I'll be here.
Okay, I'll shoot you an email.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. I can see another raising hand from Mr. Honkinson, please.
Oh, I knew it. I'm waiting for this.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Okay, Helen. Well, Ellen, that was a really wonderful talk, and you've really shown how integral women are to Herodotus' account of Sparta. What struck me, though, was that for the most part, Herodotus portrays the Spartans as treating their women as passive agents. For example, in the story of the Minions, the wives are able to get in to see their husbands because the Lacedaemonians expect no treachery from them. They don't think the women will be sort of will affect the escape of their men, and Aristone's third wife is, she's the subject of this exchange. She has no agency. Likewise, the second wife that he divorced again has no agency. Pericles is passive. In that she's seized, and Alexander's wives are not really given much personal agency. A lot of agency on the part of their family and their relatives. So it seems to me a quite interesting sort of duality here, whereby the women are central, but they're not portrayed, at least by Herodotus, or by Herodotus' account of how the Spartans treat them as having agency.
So first, I'll respectfully disagree with you about the wives of the Minyae. Remember, they're the ones who put on their husband's clothes. They are not entirely passive, right? They are not entirely passive figures. But for the earlier ones, yes. The earlier ones you could argue are passive. The only one who I would argue comes close to being in a little way more active is going to be Demaratus' own mother, in terms of the stories about her. But again, these are stories about her. But I don't disagree with you, but I don't think those two things can be are mutually exclusive. The idea that these women, as women but as what? As possessors of wealth through their reproductive capacities are disruptive, even when they themselves are not active. But the other thing I would argue is, it's not just wealth or reproduction, and here you could say it's also passive in a sense, but they seem capable of what's the word, inducing what I will call aberrant behavior in the men around them, and one could argue it's also passive. But Steve, it's almost this idea, I would argue, it's the very being of them, if that makes some sense. It's their very sexuality. It's their very, very much control over reproduction, which that is a very active role. That is what they control. And their possession of money, which makes them powerful. So I don't see them being central and powerful and passive. I think all those two things can go together. Maybe I'm more comfortable with that, with them working together than you are.
Well, I wasn't saying there's a contradiction, but just that there were two sides to the coin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that.
And I agree with you that what comes across very strikingly is the men's passion for their wives. That's the whole Aristone episode, and likewise the seizure of Pericles and Leotychidus' annoyance that he hasn't got Pericles. But thank you, Ellen. That was a really good and illuminating paper.
Thank you, Steve. I'm so glad to see you. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much. Abby.
Thank you. Again, an excellent talk. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about Lampito. She's briefly mentioned in Herodotus, and then Pausanias later on mentions that she's like the only sort of extraordinary woman from Sparta. And is there any information that Herodotus might have missed, or because we're speaking about
I'm losing you, Abby.
Wrong. There's
yes, we cannot hear you very
Abby,
clearly.
I lost half your question. So you're talking about Lampito, Archidamus's wife, yeah? Abby?
Yeah.
My phone was malfunctioning.
Abby, you're having an even worse time with technology than I do, and that's really saying something.
It's a curse. Yeah. I was just wondering, again, excellent, thank you. Excellent presentation. I was just wondering if you hadn't, thank you. Sorry for that. Audio off. There we go. Thank you. Right, start again. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about Lampito, who Pausanias makes this remark that she's the only woman or something like that from Sparta who's recorded in history, but then Herodotus just sort of drops her name as a sort of And then obviously Herodotus, an Egyptian woman, gets lots of things wrong. Is there any disorder there that he might have omitted?
Oh, you mean with Lampet? You mean
Yeah.
with Lampet? You're talking again when he just drops in, when he's talking about
Yeah.
the end of Leotychidas, when Leotychidas is end, and he talks about, right. Well, he drops her in. I mean, again, we have another example of close kin marriage, which Steve has clearly demonstrated was a way of preserving wealth within the family. But what I always find interesting there, who wears the, I'll use the expression, I never say pants because they have such a weird connotation in your country, but who's wearing the trousers in that marriage, right? It's the aunt. This time it's the aunt, right?
Yeah.
Marrying her nephew, which I find fascinating, because you wonder, it doesn't necessarily mean anything about age or anything else, but he drops her name in, which I find fascinating, because there's no controversy swirling around Archidamus, but I thought about it, Abby. I have to tell you, because when I was sitting there thinking about how he finishes discussing Leotychidas, he doesn't just end there. He has to throw in this information.
Yeah.
And like, why? All he had to say was that Leotychidas X dies and Archidamus is in power. But that's not enough. He has to talk about his daughter as well. And so to me, it's almost saying, here's another one. Like, here it is. Here, here again, these women are like, she's important because look, because what is she doing? She's the one who's anchoring the family together in terms of wealth. Right.
Thank you. Yeah.
And prestige. But she's not going to be at the head of some kind of rivalry or suicide or anything else. So I think there's nothing really more to say about her. But I do think it makes you wonder. I absolutely agree with you.
Thank you. Brilliant.
That's it. Thank you very much, Abby. I can see Mr. Jorgensen again.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on that very interesting point that came out of Abby's question, and that isn't the reference to Lampito similar to the reference to Gorgo when Herodotus explains why Leonidas became king, and part of the reason that he's married Cumney's daughter, and likewise the fact that Archidamus has married into another member of the royal family helps to consolidate his claim to the throne.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I argued that ages ago about Gorgo, and you're right. It's doing the same kind of work, that these women are important linchpins in ensuring what's the word you would say? You just used it, Steve. It's ensuring, it's like a blood bond, right? It's not just wealth, but it's also ensuring that the stability of succession. So you're right. They're almost exactly the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If anyone else would like to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand. Okay, thank
Malvina,
you.
we have Professor Andrew Baylis.
I was wondering.
Oh. Okay, yes, we have Andrew, okay.
Hello. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Andy.
Congratulations for your paper. I really enjoyed that. I've written down words that I'm going to steal when I'm teaching in a few weeks' time. I have a question quickly about Demaratus's mum.
I love her.
She's a fantastic story, and I really love her curse when she says that if they all have children by their muleteers as well afterwards. Why doesn't she have a name? Like Herodotus he doesn't give her a name. She's just AGIDO's wife.
Well, we don't have the names for we don't have, I mean, the only woman who's named in this whole sequence is Pericles, right? That's it. So I want to turn this around and ask, why does Pericles get a name? I mean that
because her name means really beautiful and it just works.
it does. No, you're absolutely right. But it is interesting because you would hope that he might bring up her name, her name when he gives her so much play, but he doesn't. But Pericles is the one who. But Pericles also doesn't become what? A queen. Well, she does, I suppose, right, for a very brief period of time. But yeah, I mean, I would argue the rule of thumb is not to be using their names.
Okay, thank you.
So
I'm happy with that.
No. Can I ask you a question? What because you're you're an expert here, right? Well, I mean, what do you think would have helped? Like, what would the name have done? I suppose is help you think about status or.
I guess so, but I'm then just thinking right at the very beginning, Herodotus doesn't give Gyges' wife name, so like he had these hugely important characters, and then he just doesn't give them names. So I'm kind of answering my own question there.
But Andy, what's funny though? Pericles goes against the one who, remember, we're told was really ugly when she was a baby. So I find this also that they're being sort of judged by how attractive they are. But
yeah.
Thank you for coming today. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
And so, Professor Millender, we have a question from the chat. Isabella Stockton thanks you very much for your presentation, which she says has really opened up some new questions about Spartan women. She's been working herself on some specific features of Lacedaemonian identity and the Spartans' relationship to their neighbours, and wonders if you would know of any women who are Lacedaemonian but not specified as Spartan.
I got to sit down and think about this. Lacedaemonian, if I'm going through my sources, certainly not in Herodotus. I'm thinking of the main sources I deal with. If they're there, I would expect to hear about them in Pausanias. So maybe some people can jump in. Perhaps in Pausanias. Maybe in Plutarch, but I don't think so. Unless I'm very happy to be corrected on this. But I think if we're going to, or excuse me, the apophthegmata, right? Plutarch's apophthegmata. We would, but again, we have the royal, we have the Spartan women. Most of them are still queens or princesses. I don't think so. I mean, Abby or anyone else, come on! I got this dream team here. You guys jump in.
There are a few I can. I mean, there's the two Epidaurus Iamata. I can't remember their names, but they're only addressed as Lacedaemonian. And then there's Xenophon of Ephesus, who writes about the Lixano, but it's more of a fictional thing than factual. I guess there's the Minye woman, if they're sort of Spartiate status. I have a catalogue of non-royal and royal women, so if you want me to send you that, I can.
I would love to see it too. That's
and there are the inscriptions and everything, and there are mirrors with names on them, and it's brilliant. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant! Fabulous. So everyone, ask Abby your question, not me. I'm done.
The mother of Brasidas also.
Yes. Yeah.
We know the name of Argileonis.
Okay, that's right. That's right.
Perfect.
If there are no further questions, we can move on. Abby or
Thank you all
something.
Yeah. Am I still inviting? Oh, you're here. There. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for your presentation, Professor Millender. It was astounding and definitely invited a massive discussion on both royal and non-royal Spartan women and Lacedaemonian women. Before this session concludes, I would like to pass over to Chrysanthi.
So, thank you very much, Abby and Catherine and Thea and Malvina for organizing successfully the first webinar of your series. I would also like to thank you on behalf of the Center. You're all making us very, very proud. I would also like to thank Ellen Millender for today's talk, which as always has been fantastic. So thank you very much, Helen. So our gratitude also goes to Mayor Vakalopoulos and the City Council of Sparti, the former Mayor of Sparti and President of the International Chamber of Commerce, the last Dr. Petros Doukas, Mrs. Georgia Zacharaki, and of course the University of Nottingham for their support both of the Centre and of all our series. Media sponsorship by Vachos Radio has been instrumental in reaching international audiences for our series, and we therefore thank Mr. Petros Kapernarakos for his contribution to the Centre's success. Last but not least, we warmly thank all of you who have attended today's talk on Teams and through the Vachos Radio web channel. So this is just the beginning of the AGIDO series. We will be circulating invitations for the forthcoming events, but this week also, because we've been trying to keep ourselves very busy this semester, we have on this coming Thursday, we will have the great pleasure of hosting the first talk of our new other webinar series, which is called Being Peloponnesian, and is led and hosted by Dr. Matt Thompson and our new global network of early career researchers working on Sparta and the Peloponnese, our CSPS SPECS global network. The inaugural talk of the series on Thursday, 5 p.m. Will be delivered by Dr. Shannon Dunn from Bryn Mawr, who will speak to us on cairns to caryatids, sanctuaries at territorial borders in the ancient Greek Peloponnese. So it remains to thank everybody for attending our joint Sparta Live and AGIDO event, and we look forward to welcoming you back on Thursday for the Being Peloponnesian event. But until then, take care and goodbye. Thank you, everybody.